Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Festival of Enterprise COVID-19 webinar series. My name is David Stevenson. I am your host for today, and I am joined today by Josh Winfield from NatWest, Business Builder Manager. Thank you, Josh, for taking the time to join us this afternoon.
No problem at all. Welcome, everyone.
Josh will be taking us through a presentation this morning, then answering questions afterwards on setting goals to grow. So the sort of brief synopsis is that we all have goals, certain things we strive for, a certain level of turnover, multiple product streams, outsourcing development. Setting goals quite often isn't a struggle, but sticking to them and building those goals into everyday decision-making can often be challenging, and quite often we lose control and sight of what we really want, particularly when life throws us a curveball like COVID-19. Indeed. In this session, Josh will be looking at revising long-term visions to keep you inspired and motivated through these challenging times. And after that, he'll break down those visions into milestones that feel manageable and give you a clear list of actions, allowing you to feel in control and feel your own progress towards those big-ticket goals. So Josh, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And with that, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. And I hope you're having a good afternoon. Well, good mornings. It'll be difficult to have a good afternoon so far, but I hope you've had a good and productive morning. And thank you very much for that introduction and for having me on here. A little bit of background about the NatWest program to begin with. The NatWest Business Builder program exists to support entrepreneurs from idea stage right the way through to scale up stage. And we run an awful lot of physical events and workshops in our hubs when we're not in situations like this. But now more so than ever, some pieces of our content have become very, very timely and I hope very useful for those of you on the call. This one being one of them, which is setting goals to grow, or as I sort of revised this in my mind when I was going through it briefly this morning, setting goals to maintain growth, particularly when we're in a challenging situation like we find ourselves. And so the session is going to be relatively high level. Some of the stuff we're going to go through, it sets a context for what's going to come a little bit later. So if you'll bear with me on some of the things, but we're going to talk about two particular key aspects of goal setting and making sure that what we do each day, what's getting us out of bed, what's getting us motivated when we're perhaps staring at the same four walls and we're perhaps not used to that. We're used to being out selling in front of people in a workshop or wherever it may be, that the motivation continues to be there and the desire and the will to keep growing continues to be there. So this is me. It's an absolutely awful photo. I apologize for that. It is my LinkedIn photo, but I'm aware that you can't see me this morning. I've got one or two tech issues with my webcam, but those of you with a burning desire to see what I look like, that is me. And I look after the Business Builder program for NatWest all over the country, working with entrepreneurs one-to-one or one-to-many. And I'm actually really, really enjoying embracing the tech and the different challenges presented with running events like this. So as I said, this is what we're going to go through. And we'll look at particularly, there's two different areas of goal setting that I want to talk through with you. Some you may be familiar with, but we're going to go through a very, very brief refresher of what visioning is and why that's important to begin with. Goals are massively important. Everybody likes a checklist. Some people love the satisfaction of having one written down and being able to scratch through it. Others like the notes app on their phone that they can tick through and so on and so on. People are very, very good at setting those goals or little action lists on a day-to-day basis. But quite often what happens is those goals can be very, very short term. They can be little things that need to be ticked off that don't relate to a wider plan. In terms of business growth and in situations like we find ourselves in with coronavirus, it's very, very important to actually set goals that stem from a wider vision. That really, really get in touch with what we do, what we've chosen to do, why we've chosen to do it, and the goals that are going to take us towards that vision, be that a 12-month, 18-month, 5-year, 25-year vision, it doesn't matter. But if we have goals that are directly stemmed from that, then you will be able to sit back at the end of every day with a sense of satisfaction that you have moved. It might be incremental, but that you have moved your goals and your progress towards what it is that you want to achieve. And you'll be able to benchmark opportunities that come your way and benchmark your actions going forward as well. So we'll look at visioning and why it's important, and then I'll go into the framework that I like to use with a lot of entrepreneurs that we work with around how to set measurable goals, and most importantly with goals. Apologies, I've just hit my own finger. That was wasn't very clever. The most important thing with measurable goals is that we check in with them 2 weeks later, a week down the line, maybe even a day sometimes, but that we check in with goals and go, have I achieved that? Is this working? Is this still a priority? As human beings, we don't tend to do that because we don't like to admit to ourselves sometimes that we've wasted time. We don't like to admit to ourselves that we've been focusing on the wrong things. But actually, with regular review of goals, it's very, very important to check in with those things. It's very, very important to nip those behaviors in the bud if they're not taking us towards where we want to go, particularly when we find ourselves in these situations. And then, as David said, there'll be opportunity for questions at the end. As a quick point, just before we go any further, anybody that would like any more information on what we cover, it's a relatively short session. It's just going to be about 25 minutes worth of content. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about visioning and goal setting, there's a lot more content as well as today's content available on the Business Builder portal. If you just type in NatWest Business Builder on Google. So, from a COVID-19 point of view, just before I dive in as well, I'm aware that you won't be able to click these links, but if people want to snap a quick picture of this slide, there's quite a few different areas of information, particularly around small business owners or self-employed individuals in general, that may be provided or may be of use to you from ourselves within NatWest, from the Federation of Small Businesses, and so on and so on. And if anybody needs any support in creating a business continuity plan to identify what essential operations are, then we're happy to support you with that through the Business Builder program as well. I will, obviously, anybody that's watching this in the future, and I understand you'll be able to going forward, making a note of those bit.ly links, or if anybody wants to get in touch with us on the basis of some of the information there, all my contact details will be on the final slide as well. So let's start off with the obvious question. What is visioning? Now, some of you, in fact, the majority of you may well have come across this term before, but it is the definition of a particular point in the future. Everybody tends to have that dream car or that dream house or that dream scenario that they find themselves in that focuses them and that drives them. Quite often people have those in their personal lives, and not so many people I find have them from a business perspective. Everybody has business goals that they want to achieve, but there isn't that same existential vision that people tend to have in their own personal lives. And yet suddenly, when we think about our personal visions and the things that we like, to go back to those, I'm aware they're material things, but to go back to that car, that house, that particular situation, that holiday that you've always wanted to do, they do drive us. They shape the decisions that we make in our personal lives. They shape our actions, and they shape what we do and who we decide to interact with on the basis of what we're trying to achieve. And yet, in quite a few cases of entrepreneurs that we work with, a vision that they have is much more short term and doesn't necessarily drive the actions, the behaviors, and the decision making in quite the same way and for quite the same length of time. So that vision, that very, very big picture thinking of where you would like to be, of what you would like to achieve, it's very, very important that we get back in touch with those things. That vision, that definition of that particular desired point in the future, that is massively important for everybody. So a vision is a clear picture of an ideal future that inspires you to action. Now, that last bit is massively important. That inspires you to action. As we find ourselves self-isolated, as we find ourselves at home with meetings dropping out of our calendar, with opportunities, with calls being cancelled and different things falling away, inspiration, desire, and motivation are the first things on the crossed off list. It's very, very easy to sit back and appreciate only the challenging situations because they are so many. And I am not for 1 second saying that we have to look to sweep those under the rug. What I am saying is it's very, very important that we take control of what we can to bring that inspiration and motivation back. And so many of you may have created visions or 12-month plans to have a great 2020 back on the 1st of January or even in December of last year that are now needing to be changed. And yet human desire or the human behavior doesn't often let us re-examine those documents or those plans because we don't like to admit when things aren't going to happen. We don't like to admit to ourselves when things need to change because we've got very, very comfortable with the plan or the vision that we had. And so just wanted to establish the definition again, once again, of what a vision is that it should inspire you to action. And so as a challenge, as we go through the next 2 or 3 slides and we look into what visioning is and why it's important in the context of our own psychology, our own mindset and motivation, as well as the goals we set, that first challenge is that when you revisit your vision, when you write your vision for the first time, perhaps if you're looking at this session, if you don't read it and get a sense of inspiration and motivation, then it is absolutely not finished. Because that is the thing, after a frustrating day, after a frustrating week, when things are starting to get on top of you, that vision should be the document that returns you to that sense of, no, do you know what? I'm going to go again tomorrow and the next day and the next day, because that is what I want. That's what I'm working towards, and I will find a way. It's that high level source of motivation. And so to give you a couple of examples, I just want to bring a few to life from various individuals. Now, the first one, I was sustained by the vision of walking into a bookstore and seeing my book on the shelf. Now, perhaps not surprisingly, I mean, all three of these are going to be fairly obvious to guess, but that is from J.K. Rowling. And when she was writing the first Harry Potter book, she used to take herself, she used to write from a coffee shop, as I'm sure a lot of you know. Before that, every day, she used to take herself to the bookshop in Edinburgh, not too far from that coffee shop, find the children's fiction section and find H. And she would go in there and she would sit in front of that shelf and visualize her book being on those shelves. And the sense of doing that, imagining the excitement that she would feel, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of drive, that would then go and motivate her to have that day. No matter whether she'd got writer's block, no matter whether she'd received another rejection email from a potential publisher, it would allow her to sit down and focus for those hours and write the next chapters or the next few pages, because that desire, that will, that vision was so strong. The next one, I saw so clearly how much better and fun air travel could be, perhaps not surprisingly from Richard Branson. Now, it's a topical one at this moment in time, I appreciate. But having that really, really clear idea, when in the late 80s, when in a sea of blue and corporate grey from the likes of British Airways and American Airlines and so on, there was that gap. There was the ability to see how much differently something could be. And that vision was so powerfully clear that somebody that had set up a record store and had that kind of background was so motivated to improve and had such a dissatisfaction with the present, had that clear vision of how it could be, that they went and understood and developed the people, the skill and the infrastructure to start up an airline. And then the final one, the most well-known favorite of all three, I Have a Dream. Now everybody knows that the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech, whether you can recite it, whether you've heard it regularly, or whether you've heard it once or twice. At the very least, people tend to encounter that in a history textbook. But I Have a Dream is perhaps the most famous, the most powerful vision that we have in the public eye that we can lean on. And it is so powerful because it is a description of a particular point in the future yet to be achieved. And that is as true when Martin Luther King read it out as it is today, unfortunately. But it is so powerful, the vision is so powerful and so inspirational that so many people have since taken on that mantle. And the reason that I've included that in this session is because much as that vision has yet to come to fruition, whereas the other two have, it is important that a vision inspires and not necessarily just inspires you. Yes, the purpose of your vision is that it should inspire you first and foremost. But if you're on this webinar and you manage a team that are all struggling with working from home, or are all working from home for the first time, and there is that dip in motivation, perhaps they have their own psychological challenges with not being able to go out. A vision, a desire of where the business is going to continue to go, where you're focused on and what motivates, can provide an incredible source of inspiration, drive and motivation for your employees as well. Much like the I Have a Dream speech or statement has sustained and driven and motivated so many since Martin Luther King passed away. So a vision, most of all, should be that high-level, engaging, motivating piece of information that you refer to with yourself. Now, I understand when a lot of people see this or they hear this session with me, they tend to think, visioning, okay, that is so far down my list of priorities right now. And I get that. I appreciate that. It does feel like a very, very high-level thing when people have very, very real challenges that they have to encounter. Now, I appreciate that. But there is a science behind this, and it's the concept of neuroplasticity. Now, neuroplasticity is the development that the more that you affirm something to yourself, the more that you work towards it, and the clearer that it is in your mind, the more regularly and the more easily the brain is going to perform the functions that support you in relation to that. So it comes down to an element of affirmation, it comes down to an element of clarity. But if you are clear, driven, and focused, and you regularly affirm what it is that you're trying to achieve, then your brain becomes better at performing the processes that help you to achieve that. And that is a really, really interesting one. You are literally, by having that vision, by having that creative and motivational element, you are flexing the brain as if it were a muscle in terms of providing those processes. So having that clear vision not only drives us, it not only forms that motivation, but it means that actually when we come to set our goals that we're going to talk about a little bit later on, that the brain performs the functions of achieving those goals better, more efficiently, quicker, and so on and so on. Much like if you were working the muscle out in the gym. So a vision, ultimately, if you're thinking about it, and I know a lot of people put together visions or 12-month plans, they are one and the same thing. A 12-month plan can be a little bit more compartmentalized, but a vision largely of, oh, by the 31st of December, I would like this to be the ideal state. Your vision should be, most importantly, inspiring to all that will be involved. Now, I would always say that, yes, if you have a team, it should inspire you, but fundamentally, your vision should inspire you in the first instance. If it doesn't, then it's not finished yet. It should be realistic, and it should be strategically sound. So in terms of what you're trying to achieve, yes, I fully agree that they should be the stretch goals in there. Nobody wants to read a vision that's mediocre. Everybody wants to read a vision that excites and motivates them, but it should be strategically sound. So opening your first branch on the moon by the end of the year, in reality, that's something that's not necessarily going to be achievable. So make sure it's a strategically sound thing. There is still going to be an awful lot of things that fall within that category that mean and yield a source of motivation. Now, this one is really important, but get it written down. If I asked anybody on this webinar just now, anybody at all, in fact, if I went into the street and asked people, obviously staying 2 meters away, what your vision is, they'd be able to tell me, you know, an idea of where they'd like to be at the end of this year or the end of next year or in 5 years' time. People would be able to tell me. But I would imagine and be surprised if the amount of people that actually had that written down somewhere was more than 1 or 2%. People are very, very good at having a sense of, yeah, I know I'd like where I'd like to go. But as individuals, as human beings, and particularly in this country, we find that we actually struggle to document it because we don't want to come across as arrogant. We don't want to come across as over the top. We don't want to come across or give anybody an opportunity to laugh at, query, or become quizzical about what we're doing. So we don't write it down. We keep it to ourselves. But actually, to go back to that slide of a few moments ago around neuroplasticity, if you document it, it is a source that you can go to after that bad day, after that challenging situation that we find ourselves in, after that particularly difficult call, of which we're all experiencing a lot right now. Being able to refer back to a document that we know inspires and motivates us is massively, massively important, because it improves that neuroplasticity, and it is a much more tacit way to remotivate, inspire, and go again. And finally, it should be communicated. Now, this can be to staff if we're talking about inspiring to all that are going to be involved, but fundamentally there has to be that element of accountability. A big part of what we are doing within the NatWest program is around accountability. As business owners, as entrepreneurs, we don't have the boss, we are the boss. And that's brilliant. That's one of the main drivers that we have to do things. The one area where we suffer in that respect is that we don't often have that element of accountability. If we have an investor, we do of sorts, but that's usually around the commercial side of things. We don't necessarily have that accountability to do things from a personal development perspective or from a personal yield perspective. So when you've got your vision written down, when you've revised it from what you had at the beginning of the year into something that is going to inspire you, take the existing circumstances that you find yourself as your starting point and go from here. Where would I like to be by the end of this year? What does good look like at the end of this year? What would I be sitting down on New Year's Eve thinking, do you know what, we've had a magic year from this point? Get it written down according to those top 3 parameters, but then most importantly of all, make sure you communicate it to those that are going to hold you accountable. Those that say to you, I thought you were wanting to develop this year. I thought you were going to do that. You know, we all have examples of that in a less impactful context. You know, I communicate to my partner in January, I want you to hold me accountable and challenge me if I don't go to the gym twice a week. So naturally on the 3rd of January, she was challenging me going, when are you going to go for the first time? But having that element of challenge, having that element of accountability, it's another element of ensuring that we continue to move forward, no matter what situations and circumstances may befall us, but that we continue to move forward. And so to finish around the visioning point, before we move on specifically to goals and how they extend from this, these are the top tips that I would have for visioning. Now, I'm not going to go through every single one. I'm going to go through some that are really, really impactful for me, but I would suggest you grab a photo of this slide if you wish. The first thing is, when you write a vision, you write it first person, past tense. So you write as if it is. If you're going to pick that time frame of 12 months, or well, not 12 months, but the end of this year, or 12 months if that suits you, or 5 years, whatever it is, there is no right or wrong to this. But when you've got that time frame, you write as if you are at the end of that time period. Tell me what you did. Tell me what you have achieved. Tell me what you saw, felt, thought. But you write first person, past tense, as if you've achieved it. You tell that story as it happened. Now, if writing prose, if writing that story is not something that necessarily comes naturally to you, not a problem. I find myself in exactly the same boat. So start by bullet pointing those achievements to begin with. Start by bullet pointing, getting them down. This is what I'd like to achieve, and weave that into a story that is going to give you the elements of excitement and satisfaction. Now, I'm not saying here that it has to be, you know, a Tolkien level size of story, but it does have to be something that's going to that you're going to read and you're going to engage with and get motivated by, even if you know what's coming. So starting with those points, making sure that all the big things that are going to motivate you, that you want, that you desire, you know they're in there, that gives you a great framework to work around. And so to tie in with that, go for something great and right for the heart, right from the heart. You know, in the reality, if there are family members that are going to benefit, if there are people that you love around you that are going to benefit from what it is that you're going to achieve, make sure that they're in that vision, because that emotional connection is going to give you that motivation. It's going to give you that drive a little bit more than if it's just something around yourself. And then the final point for me is to write very, very quickly. Write with that hot pen, and by a hot pen I mean you don't take your pen off the piece of paper. Or if you're typing on a computer, you keep typing. Don't worry about spelling mistakes, don't worry about spell check, you can do that at the end. But what's going to happen is, what stops us having visions, what stops us acting on them and from perhaps checking in with them as regularly as we should, is the situations like we find ourselves in now. It's very, very easy to go, yeah, but I can't do that at the moment because of, you know, because of the situation. I can't do this because I've got kids. I can't do this because we haven't got the financial element to do that. All of those are completely justifiable considerations, but they are limiting considerations. And by writing very quickly with that hot pen, you limit the amount of time, or you limit the amount of brain space that you give to those limiting considerations. And so as a result, you have a much purer vision of what it is that you want to achieve, because you're not allowing all of the things that exist currently to block or prohibit achieving things much further down the line that we can't predict. So those would be my top tips for visioning. And so as a suggestion and as an action off the back of this session that will allow us to talk about setting the goals off the back of this, give yourself some time at the end of this session, at the end of today, over this weekend, to really, really revisit that vision, what it is that you want to achieve by the end of the year. What does good look like? What are you going to sit back and feel that sense of accomplishment about? Get that listed to begin with. Get that to be a point of motivation, of real drive and inspiration. And get that communicated to somebody as, this is what I wanted to achieve. This is where my motivations are going to be for this year. And I want you to help me with that because you are involved in this in some way. So that's a massively important thing, to have that vision as a starting point. But as Thomas Edison famously said, a vision without execution is delusion. It's a fantastic story, but nothing more. So how we then go to put that into practice, how we actually elicit actions off the back of that, is the final point of this session. And it's all around how we set goals. Now, the first thing to think about is when you've got that vision document, if it is to the end of this year, that gives you just about 8 months to think about it. And so the first thing that we should look to do is when we have that vision document is to then break that down into a linear path of, in order to get to this point in December, I would need to have done this. Before that, I would needed to have done this and this and this and this. And so you work back a little bit like that image there, a stepping stone through a rock pool, so that you can see your path through and the things that you need to hit. How you get between each one, there might be challenges in the way. There might be things that still need to be figured out, but you are working out a list of achievements. What I find very often, one of the big challenges that I get given back to me when people write vision documents for me is they say, okay, I've got a lot to do. I feel like I've got a mountain to climb. That is a really, really big challenge. And I understand that. If you write a vision that does motivate, that does inspire, and that does drive, it will feel a little bit uncomfortable and a bit daunting by very definition. It'll feel a little bit like you're stood at the bottom of the cliff and you're trying to jump to the top. And so by breaking it down into a series of next steps, if you hypothetically broke down a vision into 10 steps, all you have to concentrate until you've achieved the first one is getting to that first one. Because if you've broken it down, you know that by focusing your attention on achieving step 1, you are then setting yourself up for the best possible springboard to achieve step 2, and then 3 and 4 and so on. So the first thing that you can do is to look to break down those actions and identify what that first key milestone would be. So if by the end of this year, it is to have identified a new product or a new service, the first thing involved in that is going to be to undertake customer research of a particular idea, or to undertake particular market research. So that would be the first element. And I'm aware I'm speaking simplistically, but that would be the first key milestone that you would want to achieve, of understanding key market analysis and understanding a market need. That would be step one. You could break it down further if you wish to, but that's the example that I'm sticking at for this point. That would be the first key milestone. And then everything else that you do with that, so then new product development, then user testing, then marketing, and then launch, that would all then take you through the next series of milestones to get you to that vision. Once you've got that first key milestone, what I like to use then, and what I use with my entrepreneurs, is I break it down into a series of, again, measurable goals. So we've done one level of granularity from vision down to milestones. Now we're going to do a second level of granularity from milestones down into these measurable goals. And for that, I get my entrepreneurs to draw a table of the priority goals that they want to that are within that, and talk about what that looks like. So if we're thinking about it right now, if we're sat here with a vision of I want to have a really, really good year where I feel like I've excelled, I've developed myself, and I've developed the business by the end of this year. Well, the first priority goal in there is going to be to finalize that vision for my business. So I've got a really, really clear idea of what it is that I want to achieve. A big part of visioning, and a big part of making sure that we're on the right track and that we are making progress, is to reflect and make sure that in my day's actions, I feel like I am moving myself forward. I do feel like everything that I've done that day in some way ties into getting towards my vision. And I want to break down that vision into those 8 monthly chunks with a clear idea or success criteria. This is what the end of that month should look like. That means that I'm ready to take on month 2, and so on and so on. So first of all, it's about taking that vision, breaking down the milestone, and then breaking that milestone down into a series of priority goals. When you've got those priority goals, that's going to be a source of clarity around where you need to be basing your days, spending your efforts, and expunging your resources. But then to go one step further, we then have to think about all the other elements of how will I know if this is working? How will I know if this is a use of time? Because you can create goals with the best of intentions, but as David said in the introduction, following them and following up on them and going, was that a good way to spend time? Was that a good thing to focus on? That's where we're not so good. And so we then go one step further and go into success measurement. And so for that, I like to use a framework called what, how much, by when. We've just talked about the what. We've just talked about what is it that we want to do that is going to help us towards that milestone. The how much is a definition of, well, what does that look like? How will I know when that's finished? So the how much for finalize a vision is a finalized document or vision statement written. So that is a Word document saved, communicated with individuals that I know every time I read it motivates me. And I want to do that as soon as possible. I'm going to give myself, it's the 2nd of April today, so I'm going to give myself a week to do that. A vision is a draft anyway, so it's going to be a living document, but I want a first version of that done by the 9th, and so on and so on. So you apply that what, how much, by when. So you give yourself the goal, you give yourself a really measurable target of this is how I'll know when I've achieved that goal, and this is when I want to have achieved that by. There is no right or wrong with the by when, but again, that element of accountability that we so often lose as an entrepreneur when we work under our own steam, just by documenting that by when, it creates a sense of accountability. If you know that you need an extra step beyond that, then who are you going to communicate that with that is going to check in with you? Could it be a coach, a mentor, somebody in your network that you know is going to dial in and achieve that? And then the final thing that's really, really important, the final thing that we always tend to overlook when visioning, when it comes to goal setting, when it comes to anything as an entrepreneur actually, is where we might need support. So often when I had my own business and when I work with entrepreneurs, I see a desire or an expectation in them to be good at everything and to be good at everything now. I'm the boss of this business, and therefore I shouldn't be the one asking for support. I should be the one giving it. And so if that sounds like you, the important thing is to know that you're not alone. If actually you are quite resourceful and you do like to identify support, that is absolutely fantastic. I'm aware that there are so many facets of entrepreneurship. But in general, if we look at the goals, we think about what a finished version looks like, and we know when we want to achieve that, we have to be honest with ourselves and go, do you know what? I need some support in that. And so if you're not familiar with visioning, if you've never come across it before, then some support that you may want to look into is there is a fantastic guy called Ari Weinzweig, and he really led or is ahead of the curve when it comes to visioning as an exercise for business development. And he has some fantastic videos around how to construct a vision, why it's important, a real development of what I've talked about in a very short space of time, all available on a couple of channels on YouTube. And that might be the support that you need. Or alternatively, if you're not quite sure how to break down your vision, you've written that big document, but you're not quite sure how to chunk that down, but you know of John Smith or Sarah Davis in your network that goes, do you know what? He does this quite a lot, or she's really good at that. It's about putting that element of accountability down on paper to go, I'm going to pick up the phone to them, I'm going to engage with them, and I'm going to understand what it is that they do. But what, how much, by when, that's something that you can set up very quickly to allow you to break down that vision, continue to move forward, continue to benchmark opportunities to make sure that you're actually achieving what it is that you want to, not being distracted by things that you could do, and identifying where the support's needed to achieve that. You're much more likely to keep yourself moving forward and not shy away from something because it's uncomfortable or it's a skill area that you don't have just yet. So I hope that's been helpful. There is an action from me, and just to sort of solidify what we've talked about, but really think about what it is that, you know, to complete that end of year vision and assign those measurable goals. Really think about what it is that you would need to reach that vision. Who do you need to help you, and are they already in your network? What is it that you really need in order to access that? Is it support from other individuals? Do you need to upskill in an area? Do you need funding? And if so, there are always going to be offshoot actions off the back of that. But fundamentally, that final point is the big one. What can I do, and by when? If you have a clear sense of this is what I can do and this is when I want to do it by, and we have that fantastic vision document that's going to keep us motivated, even when we have challenging situations like we find ourselves in, we're much more likely to take action, feel progress, and feel that sense of satisfaction, which is so important just now. So that's enough from me. I'm a little over. I appreciate it. Apologies for that. Are there any, I'd love to take any questions that somebody might have on this.
Josh, that's very kind. Thank you for sharing that with us. And excuse me. Yes, we'll open it up to questions now. We do have one question quickly here from Lester asking, who is this Harry Wine? What was the name of that chap again?
Harry Wine.
The great chap.
Apologies that you may see the screen. I'm going to type it into the chat function just here, and then I'll put it back. So that's his name just there in the chat function, and he set up a business in the States, like it's called Zingerman's Deli, and that is it really sort of took off as all healthy, all organic farm shop chain in Michigan at a time where that would just seem so left field. But he was determined to do it. It was in the late 80s. He was inspired by individuals that really talked about and broke the concept of visioning in the late 60s, early 70s. And it has worked massively for them. And you read he's published his original vision that he wrote for what he wanted his chain of delis to be. And you look at what he has achieved, and they are remarkably similar.
Excellent. Well, that sounds fascinating. I'm sure everyone will look at that. I know that I will. If we could, Faye is asking us if we could just go quickly back to that Weinzweig slide just briefly. Is that possible?
Yeah, of course. That one, I assume.
Yes, yes, that's it. So Faye, let me put this up on screen for you. The penultimate slide she wanted, in fact. So the second to last one, if possible.
That one? This
one? Let's see here. Yes, that's the one she wanted. So there it is. Great. So we have another question here from Patrick, who is asking, how does NatWest help someone to execute his or her vision while lacking the inspiration and motivation of finance because of a bad credit score? Is that something that you can speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of different ways, right? So the NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator program can help to support people around building investment cases, around building all sorts of different propositions, completely taking into account any kind of pre-existing challenges that they may have, be they financial, be they mindset and psychological. the different programs that we have in this particular situation, if there is a bad credit situation, what NatWest has set up is a couple of different facilities and loan providers internally that particularly cater for businesses, business owners, and personal applications for individuals with bad credit. So what I would suggest from Patrick, I think he said his name was Patrick, what I would suggest is if you look into the NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator, and look to engage with us either probably through the Accelerator program, I must admit, and perhaps through our partners free agent as well. Those are the two individuals that will be able to pinpoint you in a much more specific direction. But we do cater for, and I personally have worked with a couple of entrepreneurs that have overcome bad credit situations, either raised grant funding or have raised angel funding to get their business ideas off the ground.
So Patrick, it sounds like there is support there from NatWest, and to persevere and keep believing. So now, Josh, I'm sure we'll have a few more questions come through, but while we wait, so the best way to get in touch with NatWest to explore this program further is to Google NatWest Business Builder on Google. Is that right?
That's right. Or alternatively, I don't know if you guys can see that slide right now. If you're not watching this webinar from the phone, you can register for Business Builder with just an email address using the QR code on that slide. It does work over a webinar. It's quite a high-res image. Or alternatively, for anybody that doesn't have the capacity to read a QR code with their smartphone camera, they can just take a note of the URL. So there's Google, there's the QR code just there, or there's the bit.ly URL to access Business Builder as well. Yes,
that is clear, that QR code. So let me just share with everyone also this link. So it's bit.ly /3A9 3T1. So that's the link, everyone. If you can't access the QR code. So Pauline is now asking us a question. What about companies that have been going a few years? Do you help later stage companies?
Yeah, we do. So the Business Builder program is designed for companies that are idea stage through to about year 1, year 2. Any businesses that are beyond that would sort of fall into the remit of our Accelerator program. Now, Accelerator program is running 6-month intakes or cohorts, and it is a physical program outside of current situation. We have 12 hubs across the UK. And the Accelerator program is designed for businesses that are established, looking to accelerate, looking to go to that next level. And we deliver one-to-one coaching and workshops in our hubs for the Accelerator program. If you're further beyond that as well, we have our next level program, which focuses on key infrastructure development for businesses that are turning over a minimum of $500,000 a year or have raised at least that in investment as well. So there are 3 core programs for businesses, right from idea stage, helping people to develop tools and techniques to validate their business and get it working, which is Business Builder. There is the Accelerator program to get businesses ready to scale. And then there is the next level program for businesses that are scaling.
Okay. Pauline is now asked a follow-up here, asking how we get after that, but then she's followed that up with they have been going for 30 years. So it sounds like the latter program would be more
absolutely, yeah. So it sounds like that there would certainly be a fit there. The way that you would look to get involved in that, Pauline, is if every application for next level is taken from Accelerator applications. So if you Google the NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator and go through the application process for that, because of the age of your business and it's taken on time operated, turnover, or investment raised, it can be cumulative figures as well. You'll then be either allocated to the next level program or you'll be put into the Accelerator program. But yes, on the basis of what you've said, it does sound like you'd be a candidate for the next level program.
Great. We have another question here from Arif asking if there are any fees for these programs.
No, they are all completely fully funded by NatWest. You won't pay a penny.
Great. Great. Well, let's just wait a few moments and see if any other questions filter through. but everyone is. Oh, do you have to bank with NatWest? Is another question that Pauline is asking.
This is a great question. So for Business Builder, no, absolutely not. For the Accelerator program, you have up to 18 months of support taken in 6-month chunks. For the first 6 months, no, you do not have to be a NatWest customer. For months 7 onwards and for the next level program, yes, you do.
Okay. And is there a process for switching banks that's part of the accelerator or part of the program?
Yes, absolutely. We have staff involved within the program, not the coaches. Obviously, within the Entrepreneur Accelerator, the majority of us are fully trained business coaches, but there are staff within the accelerator that's explicitly there to help people with switching queries or to support invoice finance requests or loan requests and things like that.
Excellent. Great. Well, that I think, so let's see here. Given the current situation, is this program online? Is this online, and how will the program work? So maybe you can speak a bit to this sort of what's happening currently with this COVID-19.
Absolutely, yeah. So as of 4 weeks ago, the Business Builder program exists in a largely digital capacity anyway. So the Business Builder portal, if you've clicked on the QR code or intend to, and you register for that is effectively a Netflix style player for you to access a lot of different learning resources. A lot of the videos do contain me, so you haven't quite escaped me on that one. But then that was always backed up with a series of physical events. Now I was scheduled to run 165 events this calendar year all over the UK. They have all been digitized. So we run weekly digital events talking through our content. So it could be anything from goal setting to developing mindset to making sure that your pitch is ready to making sure that your key financial statements are good. All of those sessions are being digitized and are available. If you sign up for Business Builder, you can access all of those. The Accelerator program, there is a brand new cohort about to kick off at the very end of April, and certainly the first 3 months of that have all been scheduled to be delivered digitally, and then at that point we'd like to think that we'll be able to reopen our hubs, but if not, we have a contingency to deliver the remainder of that 6-month program digitally as well. Same goes to the next level.
And there are still spaces to join this accelerator program that begins at the end of the month?
So at this moment in time, it may be that applications, apologies, because I look after Business Builder, so I'm not massively involved in the Accelerator program. Yeah. My understanding may be that it may be a little late now that we've just gone into April for this cohort. However, applications and registering interest always remains open for the next intake. If you weren't able to get onto the program for the one-to-one coaching just now, then there is still an awful lot of ways in which an individual can engage with the Accelerator program outside of the application window, outside of actually being a formal member. We run public workshops, we run regular networking events. They are all scheduled to be delivered via Zoom. Networking events typically are around key topics such as sales, marketing, infrastructure, and to give you an element of what they look like, they are run by a member of our staff, very similar to yourself, David, as in playing the host. We will play host, but we will have a speaker, and to give you an example, we had the current operations director of Unilever delivering our infrastructure networking event just last month. So there is an awful lot of support that you would be able to get access to, whether you were a member of the Accelerator program or not. Just register your interest, and we'll keep everybody abreast via email of what we're running.
And if you weren't able to join this current cohort, then your application would roll into the next one?
It doesn't roll on, but if applications have closed, you will automatically be applying for the next one.
Understood. Okay, great. Yeah. So hopefully that's clear to everyone. Excellent. Well, let's see if we have some more questions come through. But in the interim, and if we don't, Josh, I would like to thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon. It's been a very informative session.
Thank you very much.
It's certainly a very interesting program, and what you spoke to is certainly valuable information for people if they're not considering using these tools and techniques and these strategies. I'm sure that they will after having seen this presentation, which everyone will be available for replay immediately after the event finishes. Just a few comments here before we do jump off. one from Mike Wills saying this is the best yet. Thank you so much. Thank you. This was brilliant. I feel very inspired. Huge round of applause. Lots of people have taken lots of things on board. Very helpful. So thank you very much. I think everyone's found it incredibly helpful. I know that I thought it was very informative, and I very much appreciate you taking the time to join us this afternoon, Josh.
Thank you very much. It's very, very kind, everybody. I'd look forward to speaking to you again in the future. If anybody would like to contact me, that may look like just a central mailbox. It's picked up by me and one other. So if you would like to contact me directly, that is the best email address to do so. We'll happily take any queries or any other questions that come to mind as well.
Great. I'm going to post that address here in the chat as well. So anyone wants to reach out to the Business Builder team, that is the best way to get in contact, and I'm sure that many of the people here who joined us today will be in contact. So yes, thank you again for taking the time, and it was a very, very informative session.
No problem. All the best, everybody. Stay safe, and look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon.